Welcome to the second viewing where love wins every time. I'm Dan.
I'm Kyle.
Shaka bra.
Today on the podcast, we have Mad Max Fury Road for all you out there. This is a pretty good flick. Came out last year. Came out in May 7th, which, I think is funny because it was a middle of the year release and it stayed in our pop culture and film conscious for very long because this movie was so rad.
Yeah, it was absolutely at the top of our list for best movies of the year. 100%, totally. No doubt. I think the Oscars, it proved that with the Oscars as well a little bit.
I was happy to see that they gave it some love because honestly, There's a lot of factors that go into that usually they'll screw them over. Yeah. The fact that it was released so early in the year is usually like a dead giveaway. They're not going to give any love to it, but yeah, the Oscars ended up giving them the most nominations. They ended up giving Mad Max the most nominations, which is pretty sweet.
Our boy Tom Hardy kills it in this flick, dude. And
honestly, murders it. Yeah. But probably the person who kind of steals the show is Charlize Theron, honestly.
Yeah, Furiosa, dude.
And it's kind of cool because you don't really expect for this movie to really be about Furiosa, but it definitely is. Mm-hmm. The movie's called Mad Max.
Actually, there was a bit I was reading earlier on the Wikia page that I guess there was supposed to be an appearance of the original Mel Gibson.
Our boy Mel.
Yeah.
Shalom to that.
Yeah, so shalom to that. Mel Gibson was supposed to make an appearance as what they called an outsider or something, but it takes place in a specific town that I guess George Miller's script didn't end up going to, so it was cut from the movie. And then I guess there was a point where our boy Tom Hardy and Furiosa were supposed to sort of link up. That was supposed to be the love interest of the movie.
Interesting.
But George Miller said, no, it's going to take away from this movie being about Max, and it's going to end up being about Furiosa, and we don't want that. Right. So he sort of left that out. Though
That's cool.
They do sort of allude to the fact that there's almost something between them in a weird way.
Well, I see it as more of a companionship. They're simply just friends who are there for each other. I mean, you're right. It could lead somewhere more romantic, but I like that the movie doesn't really force you to think that way.
Yeah.
Also, I guess you're bringing up a lot of script changes. I assume that's probably based on the fact that this movie was supposed to be made in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And George Miller kind of couldn't get, the funding or, the budget he wanted for years and years and years. He had to go on and make flicks like Babe and Happy Feet and Happy Feet 2.
So this guy grinded out.
Oh, yeah. He played the long grind game on this one for sure. Yep. And it paid off because Mad Max is one of those flicks that I don't think would have been as good back then, honestly. They were able to use practical effects with special effects, current CGI, in the best way possible.
Yeah.
This movie, I think it made people realize that they want less CGI in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, yeah. And the choreography, having all of those massive machines driving at the same time.
Well, they built those. So those are actual vehicles, right? So
which is
alone
crazy.
Is pretty sweet. Yeah. This ain't no Speed Racer. This is I don't know. I think that's pretty dope. And I don't know. One huge thing that most people talk about in terms of filmmaking for this flick is just the center frame, right? Most of this movie has the lens and the camera in the center frame, so whatever's going on in the middle of the frame is what's most important.
Yeah.
And it's giving most detail and the most, visual storytelling of the film. And meanwhile, there's so many weird things going on each, top,
the frame
bottom,
is
left, right.
Yeah, the frame is just filled with information, and that's probably going to be one of the most important parts as we continue to talk about this movie, is that it's filmed perfectly in that center frame.
Right.
So everything you need to know to understand what's going on in the movie is right in the center, right dead center. But
yeah, I think that's interesting though, hey, because there's so much going on in each scene, but you never really feel confused.
Yeah,
you're never kind of it's kind of like sensory overload, but at the same time, it's easy to understand. It's accessible.
Yeah, it really is. Everything sort of follows suit and mimics and mirrors what's happening in the center.
A lot of symmetry, right? And a lot of mirrored looks for especially the driving scenes when Max is kind of tied to the front of one of the war vehicles, I think.
Yeah, well, it's visually told so well, right? But one thing I also want to bring up is, the screen is very noisy with visuals. It's very noisy. There's a lot going on. Yeah. But as soon as you get to the end of a scene or sort of an important time to reflect on what's just happened, there's a nice little break.
Oh yeah, they do that. They pan out from the action and just kind of show the road. They show the landscape of the road. Yeah. And there's the first road. One that kills me every time is they they light off like a firecracker or like a flare.
Yeah, there's like a red and orange flare that go off.
And it's just so beautiful. It's very, because you're going from I don't know, I guess the comparison between such a hectic scene and such a small, minimal, almost like a break. Kind of like sound like gotta catch my breath. Like,
and it's really cool. You really get to reflect on what the hell just happened,
Yeah, well, I think, that being said, I think we should probably jump into the flick at this point, because this movie is kind of cool in a way that some would say not a lot goes on. It's just about driving, right? They drive and they come back. But that's not necessarily wrong, because that's literally the plot for the most part. But it's cool how massive a world and like mythos and, lore George Miller has made for this flick in particular. You look at the past 3 Mad Max and they have that too. Obviously there's a lot, Mad Max, Road Warrior, and Thunderdome. There's a lot of that, but I think it's cool that, someone who hasn't seen those films can just jump into this and kind of get bombarded with a really cool universe.
Yeah.
Without feeling it forced in your face, trying to let's like, for instance, like back in the day when we played a lot of World of Warcraft. You jump into that game, no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
You have to literally play that for like days and days to get an idea of what the lore really is. Like this movie is the runtime isn't even terribly long, but at the end of the day, you kind of this movie's just exactly 2 hours, and you kind of have an entire escape from reality, and you get thrown into this world and universe that he created.
I'd venture to say that within the first 10 minutes, where Max is caught and inside of, he's caught by the war boys, right? And he's being branded, and he's about to be drained for his blood, to be given a transfusion, and you understand that almost right away. Like within the first 10 minutes, Max is trying to escape, you get that that's what's going on.
He's a fugitive. He's trying to. You get the idea that there's some sort of like government, like
there's some regime or gang or like warlord or something
that's hanging over whatever establishment he's at, and that he wants nothing to do with that. Obviously, almost like a cult. It feels like in a way, or like some sort of strange, dictatorship that people want to be a part of. It's kind of weird, but that is kind of what this film opens up with. Max is trying to escape. He's trying to become a war boy, and they want to brand him. They want to, turn him into one of them, and he wants something to do with that. He's, his own person. He's like a nomad. He's a drifter.
Yeah. But then you also understand that he's haunted by some memories of stuff that you understand might have happened in the past. There's a little girl that's haunting.
It could be his daughter. It could be his sister.
Visions, who
knows?
We don't really know. I mean, throughout the course of the movie, we never really figure out. But we can tell that he's haunted by something in the past, as if he's running from something.
Yeah, and that's where this movie does it so well. He's literally running from his past while he's running. Like, that's crazy visual storytelling. Also, this movie does a killer job of, the idea of like showing and not telling. There's not a lot of dialogue throughout this movie. There's not a lot of trying to get. Just force feeding the audience information. It's just more or less.
It's just enough, yeah. The visual speaks for itself, really. Which
you don't get a lot, and I think, especially in a big budget film like this, or even something that's going to become a franchise, usually you're trying to develop a certain idea of what the viewer is trying to kind of like latch onto, I guess. But in this movie, it's more or less, here's what it is. Take it for what you want it to. Things don't get terribly confusing, but you can view it however you want, because we're gonna tell you only so much, and you have to figure out the rest yourself.
But I'd say this movie is pretty easy to connect to our reality right now, as the world really revolves and sort of focuses and needs oil, just like this world does.
Okay, yeah.
Nature's slowly dying. We've got global warming up every corner.
You got,
that's going on. So it's a similar vibe in this
Trump
world.
Vibe. We got the Donald Trump vibe watching out for us.
Yeah. People are trying to build walls and shit, keep other people out. It's not a good vibe.
I'm not into that really overall.
But no, like you can really see the connection between that world and our world, and sort of how our world might one day turn into that world. You can see that connection, and it's almost as if they try to make that connection.
Yeah, it's a weird post-apocalyptic universe. You get that a lot in movies and like video games and TV nowadays. That post-apocalyptic is kind of a big thing right now.
Yeah, but
it's cool that they're able to bring it into a more realistic setting. Well, maybe realistic theme. Bringing up oil. This is the kind of thing I guess you could see happening. So the viewer kind of relates to like
food shortage is basically what's going on in this world, right?
Yeah.
You can't grow anything. The land's not fertile anymore. so there's no nutrients in it or whatever is happening. But what's also really cool is I would venture to say that this movie really brings you back to the old movies. After you watch Fury Road, even if you haven't seen any of the other Mad Maxes, any of them, that you will want to go back and watch them because the world is so intriguing and it's so rich and vivid, and you'll have so many questions about the world, not even necessarily the story, but the world.
Yeah, okay.
Like, what happened? How did it get this way? Like, why is what's
That's
going
a cool
on?
point to make because the original Mad Max came out in 1979, 36 years before this one.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to make, I guess, seems to be considered a prequel from what most things have been saying.
Right.
The fact that you can make a prequel based off of that film 36 years beforehand, like, and pull it off and maybe even make it better, some would probably say. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool feat. Not a lot of flicks have done that. You know, you've had Wall Street completely failed at that. There's been a couple other instances of revamping franchises, even with the same cast and crew sometimes, and it just doesn't pan off. Mm-hmm. But I think the fact that Miller kind of was trying to make this flick for as long as he could, and kind of he had an original mindset for so long, and obviously, like you were saying, he modified it for current times or how we saw the script now. It comes off flawlessly. I mean, you don't get a lot of filmmaking like this anymore. And I think it's so cool that people gravitated towards it. This is kind of a strange action movie in a way. It's not what we're used to seeing. There's no shaky cam. There's no like Michael Bay like explosions. There's like
it's filmed in a very unique way for sure.
It's very stylized, but it connects with a large audience only because it is really entertaining. At the end of the day, it's just an entertaining movie. Yeah,
and you get the impression that the world is just sick and dying a lot, just like the people that we see in like just the bystanders and the people that are living under the regime of our main antagonist here.
Morton Joe, that's our boy. He's terrifying. I'll be honest. He's so gross looking, like. When he's sitting in that car, like pumping, you can see like some sort of fluid pumping into himself, almost like a Bane kind of look in a way.
Yeah, it's almost got like oxygen tanks around him or something like that, like oxygen to his skin or something weird like that. And then there's also a scene where one of his henchmen is sort of like rubbing a white powder on his back.
Right.
Before he puts back on his shield thing, which like must pump some form of gas from the tank towards his skin or body. It's weird overall, but it's what's keeping him alive.
There's so many weird little things that I guess you never really fully understand, but you just get the idea that, this man is just the guy who's in power. He's the one everyone fears. He's the one who has access to water. He's the one who has access to oil, and he commands.
That makes me want to bring up a point. Is oftentimes we see these villains, similar in my eyes to how a Morton Joe starts off is, he's a dictator, but he's not a fighter. No, but we find out later that he's very much a fighter. His first not his first instinct, but basically, as soon as he finds out that Furiosa has escaped with one of his most prized possessions, which is all his virgin ladies to have his children.
Super weird, by the way.
Yeah, which is pretty weird, but he instantly gets the team together and takes off, and he leads the pack. He takes
action. Like he'll stand up for what he needs to.
And there's points where he absolutely leads the entire battle against he leads the chase, really, right? So when they're passing through that canyon and there's that other gang, the motorcycle gang, that's trying to chase after them, right?
Right. He's ready. Like they have a game plan for the most part. Not only that, but they grab most of their like army or most of their members.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess
it's cool that he's not just the weakling you might think he is, just the dictator, just the mind behind the evil. Well, he's very much not afraid to jump into action, which I could see why people would think that is scary. Living in that world, like Morton Joe isn't afraid to step up and
he's not afraid, but I couldn't see him going like hand to hand with Max.
Right.
I couldn't.
No.
He definitely has like a network around him that he knows how to manipulate. He knows how to use properly. He has
exactly. Like he's strong in his own, with his own tools. Like for example, his guns and his explosives and what else does he use? He drives that blue 4x4 looking massive truck thing, right?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of how the chase starts, I guess. We have Max trying to escape, and he latches on with Furiosa, who we assume is kind of just doing some sort of delivery or some sort of run for Morton Joe, kind of unclear, but she's just, that's her job.
Well, in the beginning of the movie, they say something like when they're blowing the horn for
Furiosa to leave.
Yeah, they call it the war truck or something like that, and it's a war rig. So they call it the war rig. Furiosa hops into the war rig. She's getting all kinds of cheers, and then Immortan Joe lets down some water for everyone, and he says, "Let's pray for our team and Furiosa and the war boys to go and get gas from Gastown." So they're going
to Gastown. I want to know what Gastown's like.
Yeah, exactly, right. That's the world that they develop. Is like there's a town revolt that they call gas towns, like where they get the main supply of oil and gas that they need. This world, like, it's weird. Like, what's valuable in this world is food, water, and gas, basically.
Only because there's no form of transportation. All they have is these war rigs.
Yeah,
and they need the gas to I guess monitor the land or even explore for further prosperous areas.
Yeah, to go far distances quickly because I mean essentially it's just arid desert everywhere.
Oh yeah, it's desert area.
The only thing we come across is the desert and some kind of like putrid swamp where nothing will grow.
Right,
but that's led on to believe like the less fertile place or something like that. Right?
Well, it's funny because where Immortan Joe and like the rest of the kind of gang members live. It's the most prosperous area. There's still green there. There's still mountains. There's water.
But it's manipulated because it's on top of the mountain that only Immortan Joe can get in.
But we'll get into that a little bit later because the ending is a little bit interesting in that way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the chase kind of begins. We kind of get this idea that we get introduced to Furiosa as kind of maybe one of the top people under Immortan Joe. Like he respects her. She respects him, I suppose. But in reality, has kidnapped, his women that he plans to make, the mothers of his child, I guess.
And what do they call it? Not too sure what they're called, folks, but anyways, there's 9 of them, and we sort of get introduced to them a little bit where they show their face and they say, "Oh, it's hot down here," because they're hiding in the very bottom of this war rig that Furiosa is clearly in cahoots with in some respect. That her crew, like Furiosa's crew that's on her war rig and following her, have no idea that those girls are there, right? So now we kind of get an understanding that, Furiosa's up to no good. She changes course away. She changes course away from Gastown and towards west or east or some other direction.
Well, they want to go to the green place, right? Which is where her, the many mothers live. This is where Furiosa was born. Right. She only knows that through her mother, but
we don't quite know this at that point in the story.
No, but this is where they're heading to. This is where they're heading to, and then we get Max attached along to another war rig, fronted by one of the members, and his name is Nux. Wonderfully played by my boy Nicholas Hoult. Which any of you guys ever watched the first season of Skins? Good shit. Check that out. Also was in that movie like Warm Bodies, but like don't watch that, it's not very good. And he's a pretty funny character. He's like that infamous line, it's like, "What a day, what a beautiful day," and he's like spraying like silver spray paint on his mouth or like chrome or something like that.
I think they explain some of it, but basically the idea behind it is before they want to get to Valhalla, and so Immortan Joe's whole thing is like, if you die, you will join me and my brothers in Valhalla, and Valhalla is like the sacred. It's like heaven, essentially. It's like, or you will be like a respected warrior.
Be anointed
in Valhalla.
there. Yeah, you'll be respected. Yeah. Your second life will be much greater if you prove to, I guess Immortan Joe or you're the person you worship that you are worthy.
Yeah, and so in order to say that they're prepared to give their life in the next second, or they're about to make a risky move or commit suicide or something like that, they'll light off this basically silver spray paint in their mouth. And I don't know exactly what it does, like if it has any like if it's like chemically, like, I don't know, is it meth in a can? Who really knows?
It could be vape, probably.
Yeah, it could be vape, dude. Vape Nation, y'all.
Check it out.
But anyways, so what's his name? Nux?
Nux.
Okay, so Nux basically has Max as a blood bag on the front of his...
Yeah, which is kind of a terrifying sight at first, because also kind of like Bane again, not gonna lie. Typical Tom Hardy. But... Yeah, no, that's what's really interesting is you kind of get to see Tom Hardy slowly escape from he David Blaine's it basically for a minute,
or he's in a ridiculously risky situation on the front of a war rig moving how fast.
And they kind of have him as they have him set up as like an idol or kind of like a oh, look what we've done, look what we can do to you. Like, it's kind of
Yeah.
like they're taunting, like, how, crazy they are, how powerful they are. They're using this, like,
But it's very much
human as a totem, right?
Yeah, it seems very much within their character for comparing these war boys to the ones in the original movies.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that connection seems pretty clear for sure. In the first flick, though, or the first movie, they're a little zanier, I'd say, a little more charismatic in a way.
Yeah.
But in this movie, they choose to focus on just a few, and they kind of almost seem like soldiers or like stormtroopers in a way. Not a lot of character throughout each member, but the ones that are prominent in the film spend time, and they kind of get that character development. Nux especially, he kind of like turns a new leaf later in the film, and him and Max spend a lot of time together. They kind of team up at one point in a way.
Yeah, basically they're
stuck together, and when their war rig kind of gets destroyed, they wake up and they're handcuffed together, and they're like, "Where the hell are we? What are we gonna do?" And the only person that comes by, of course, is Furiosa in her rig with the women, and they make amends in a way. They offer their services for one another. Max has a gun, and he's threatening them, so they all hop in together into this war rig.
Yeah.
And they're kind of ahead of Mort and Joe at this point, but they don't have much time.
Yeah.
Don't have much time at all.
And you can hear a Morton Joe coming behind them, or you can hear the war party and their drums and guitar coming behind.
Speaking of guitar, the true champion of this flick, hands down, is our boy Comadoof. The guy with the guitar, the flaming guitar pianist. That guy, he just comes out of nowhere in front of like 20 like amps and just rocking on the guitar.
Yeah, he's hooked up to like a
fire.
system of bungees so that he can never fall off the rig. So he's just flying around playing guitar forever.
It makes almost no sense, but I'm very into it.
Well, I'd say, like, war parties, you always have some kind of a chant, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's something to, like, intimidate their enemies and get them psyched up, right? So I get the idea behind it. And it definitely
zany.
works,
It definitely works, and it's zany. And that's kind of like all the character design, all, like, the costume design in this movie is so, like, it's not, I wouldn't even call it over the top, but it also reminds me of, like, a weird version of like steampunk or something.
Yeah.
It's like some sort of strange combination between like Western.
Yeah, it's like Western grunge steampunk. Or something like weird. That. But
I could see Comadoof Warrior in like a K-pop video for sure. Though.
Yeah.
It makes just as much sense.
So, oh man, I'm realizing how much stuff there is. Like we're barely into the movie at this point in our description, but there's so much to talk about. Like there's so many details that we've even missed talking about. And I don't think we should cover them all. Just sort of the big ones, the turning point in the plot, because you guys really go and check out this movie. It's pretty fantastic.
Oh, you got to watch this flick. Honestly, this is hands down one of the best pictures of last year, and
it's probably my favorite of last year.
Your favorite last year? Dude, that's wild. It's up there for me, hands down. I saw this movie the same night actually I saw Avengers 2. And that movie was nothing compared to Mad Max. Don't get me wrong, Avengers 2 was okay. That's another day, another dollar. But I think Mad Max overall was like just a joyride and a half. Like I felt so amped up leaving that theater, and like every scene was like, oh shit, what just happened? It was an experience, definitely. But, we're going to get more into the flick after the break here. We'll catch you guys after the breaker.
And we're back. So before we left off, guys, we were talking about how Max has just taken the war rig. We didn't really mention this, but he's disarmed the vehicle. Like, he's disarmed everyone in the vehicle. And they have ditched the war boy that Max was strapped to in the beginning of the chase scene. Now this is
Nux, yeah.
With Nux. Now
at this point, we don't know where Nux really is, but we find out that he is kind of hiding on the war rig with the rest of them,
right?
Which plays a big factor later on.
And the war rig ends up slowing down because it's got a gas container, a gas trailer on it,
right?
And something is sabotaged with it, where the wheels aren't turning, or it's not powered on its own, or something. Yeah, like that.
They're trying to pass off a large amount of gas to the bicycle group or the motorcycle group through the mountains. And when they go there to do the exchange so they can get through the path, they kind of trick them, sort of thing, and they just go through the path anyway, and they don't give any of the oil, whether it's there or not, to them. And they chase after them.
I think they do. Don't they leave it and blow it up? Am I crazy?
Martin Joe ends up blowing it up.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I was thinking even before that, it's like when the war boy Nux is on the war rig, he sabotages that gas tank that they are about to drop off, right?
Yeah.
And then that's how Max gets off the rig to go and find the problem, and he ends up running into Rux.
Well, they just leave that tank there, and then eventually, when Immortan Joe comes by, it explodes.
Right.
Yeah. Which is pretty funny, honestly, because they like end up trapping Immortan Joe through the tunnel, and he tries to make his way through, and you kind of see these cars like work their way over these boulders. It's actually pretty neat.
They basically just throw a wrench in there, and at that point, Immortan Joe has called and already met up with some of the other crews that he's associated with, or like some of his other team or nearby friends or something like that, right?
Yeah, and you kind of get the idea that Immortan Joe has a lot of his members with him right now. Yeah. Kind of maybe a little bit of foreshadowing to the fact that there's not many people back at, or many higher ups back at,
There's very few people left at base, that's for sure.
So the race is still on. They're still going through. They're trying to make their way to the green world, the green spot.
The green place or whatever
the green place, that's what it is. And they kind of come across like a big swampy, poisonous area. And the wheels get stuck, and it's kind of a big roadblock for them. But, describing all the chase scenes is kind of hard to do over here on the audio cast here right now. What's more important is kind of what's going on with the characters and what's going on visually. Because here what we see is, Nux ends up kind of befriending one of the women on the war rig, and he kind of becomes part of the team. And he realizes that he kidnapped Max, and he got to Furiosa, and at that point, Immortan Joe still didn't care about his well-being getting to Valhalla. Yeah. So he realized that the idea of Valhalla isn't what it's cracked up to be, and he would rather be his own person or care about what he wants to care about.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to note that at this point the visuals have changed. Like, we have an idea that they're going to somewhere called the Green Place, right? But we have seen basically the same scenery the entire time, with the exception of a different mountain. Yeah. And so now, as it starts to get dark, we run into a swampy area with dark crows and figures standing on stilts just to get through the swamp, right?
The color palette in this scene is awesome too. It's very blue and purple, a little bit of red in there. Yeah. Super dreamy. Kind of gives you you can tell it's nighttime for sure. Mm-hmm. And that's the cool thing. You get the idea that time has passed without a lot of events going on. Yeah. You kind of understand how long this trip's really taking.
Yeah. And so after they get stuck, they need to get out, but they realize, there's some shots fired at them, and they realize that part of Immortan Joe's team is right on their trail, at which point Max actually deviates from the team as they get the vehicle unstuck, go out ahead. Now Max, he says, if I don't come back in 5 minutes, just keep going. And they say, and at this point you get the idea that they're kind of attached to each other. Max has befriended this team, Furiosa, and Immortan Joe's 9 wives, if that's what you want to call them.
Yeah, I think the reason that Max and Furiosa get along so well is because they have similar goals, right? Max wants to run away from what he's experienced. He kind of wants to be his own person. But at the same time, he's not trying to really, cause the ruckus, nor does he really have any vengeful consistencies in his personality at this point.
Yeah, he really doesn't want to fight. He just wants to be left alone.
He wants to be left alone. He wants to be his own person. And in a sense, Furiosa's looking for the same thing. She's just trying to find her family. She's trying to find, a different world, which, I would assume a lot of those slaves feel the same way.
And they're looking for a better life, right? When they can create for themselves, not under the rule of someone else.
Exactly. And, they're the kind of people that are just, they're good people at heart, and they want to work together. And it might take a while for them to figure that out, but when they do, they're a great team. Yeah. And it's fun to see them interact on screen together. I think that's a really good portion of this film. Yeah. Is Furiosa's interaction with Max. And around this time is when you kind of get the idea that Max isn't the main character. Furiosa definitely is. And you kind of start to realize that.
I would argue differently.
Oh man, I think Furiosa is this movie, hands down.
Okay, well, I think they're both very important parts of the movie, but I still think Max is the most important part.
Completely disagree. 100%.
Really?
Yeah, man. Furiosa, the movie's based around her. That she wants to get to the green place to find her family.
I think the movie's based around Max's.
Dude, I don't know.
Dude, it's based around Max's fucking chance to escape.
You would have called it Furiosa, Fury Road. Same movie.
No,
that's all I'm saying right now. Where did Max escape from? The place Furiosa worked at. Where's Furiosa escaping from? Immortan Joe. Who's Immortan Joe's best worker? Furiosa. What is Furiosa doing? Taking Immortan Joe's women. It's Furiosa all day in this flick, dude. Straight up.
Dude, but it's all about Mad Max's chance to escape.
With Furiosa.
Yeah. That's all I'm gotta say. 100%. Okay, but no, it's about his chance to escape.
And you being sexist right now?
No, I'm not being sexist. God damn it.
I get a little bit of a sexist undertone.
Right you get a sexist undertone?
Yeah, dude? Honestly. Straight microaggressions right now. I really want you to calm down.
Wow, yeah, I'll just check my privilege really quick.
Really would. Anyway, so back to Furiosa Fury Road. As far as I'm concerned, this film does take a great turn. And what happens is you end up finding out that where this swampy area is actually where the green place used to be. And they power through it and they go find this group of women who's the many women or the remaining members of Furiosa's, I guess her clan or wherever she grew up with or wherever her mother grew up with. And they explain to her, they're like, there is no green place anymore. And her sense of hope kind of gets dwindled down. She's like, I brought these women out here. I risked their lives. This is what my whole life has been leading up to, this one big journey to find and go back home. And so it's a sham. Yeah, and she's crushed.
There's no green place. And but what happens next is kind of magical. They all sort of come together, knowing that they have a similar goal in mind. Well, mind you, the many mothers, as they're called, I think, is they sort of immediately take in Furiosa and her gang.
Yeah. Well, and I think they will because they understand that they're part of the gang. They're descendants of that.
Or at least Furiosa is, and these are her companions now, right? So.
Yeah, and they bring them in saying these are good people, and they even explain that Max and Nux are they're trustworthy men or whatever, and they're there to help the cause, and they're not there to cause a ruckus or anything like that. And they recognize Furiosa to some degree, or they recognize her name maybe, or the connections there.
Yeah.
We get the idea that she was very young whenever she left the screenplays, but we don't really know how young or...
Well, I think she mentions the days roughly or something like that. It's been this many days since
yeah. So obviously showing that this is something she's thought about for a long time, and she's tried to strategize out for as long as she could, and her plan was pretty flawless. Just the fact that she just didn't know that where she was heading to sadly didn't exist anymore.
She said that she slowly kept going further east and east and east or something like that to figure it out. And I think she also mentions that she had planned to get into a war rig. That was her idea. She needed to get into a war rig in order to get there.
Which makes sense.
Get there with any chance.
Which makes sense. That's the best way she ever could have got there. And not only that, but she obviously gained in Immortan Joe's respect along the way, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Furiosa at one point was one of his wives, right? I think that's how the story goes. He was once one of his wives, and then she lost an arm. Something happened and she was no longer perfect or something like that.
Dude, I cannot tell you. I have no idea. This movie has too many layers.
Yeah, 100%.
This is an onion of a film if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, man, we've seen this movie how many times now? We're still learning new details about it.
And actually, her arm's kind of a cool point to bring up. The fact that it's she has that robotic arm kind of going on. It's interesting that you don't get a lot of technology in this movie, or modern technology, I guess you could say. You see a lot obviously with the mechanical side point in terms of automobiles, but actual robotics and stuff like that, there's not a lot of that.
Yeah,
it's almost out of place in a way, I would say.
It feels very natural though, seeing it.
I think it looks natural, but thinking back at it, it's a little strange because you don't really see anything like that in the rest of the film.
Yeah, you're right.
But I mean, the way they pull it off is true. It doesn't look that's the thing. You never question anything in this movie. It's there's so much weird shit going on the whole time, but you're never why is that?
Yeah, exactly. It just feels very natural. It just flows. Everything really works and comes together really well.
I think it's one of those ideas where he spent so much time. George Miller spent so much time in being so meticulous about where the set was going to look and what this was going to look. And the fact that he spent so much time with that, it comes off natural. He was so you could tell that like most of this movie was based on set design and based on plan, how it was going to look and how it was going to feel when you watched it.
Yeah, and I mean, not to mention this guy's had the idea in his mind for how many years, right? Like he has been perfecting this and thinking about it for so long, and I think it really it came out amazing. Like I have nothing to complain about really.
No, me neither. And one of my favorite scenes actually is the scene where Furiosa finds out that, you know, there is no green place, or what she's working towards is not going to come about. And she falls down to her knees in the sand, and she kind of is like, everything kind of becomes silent. You don't even really hear her scream. And it's just, she belts out like, you know, in anger and sadness. And again, you get that nice wide shot, and it's symmetrical, and
she's completely centered, and day turns to night after that happens, right?
And I don't think it's weird to see a movie that's very like artful in a way, but it's so accessible. It doesn't happen a lot, especially for an action film. Most action films these days are, you know, all in a very similar vein. You know,
little bit cut and dry sometimes.
You either kind of got your dramatic action movie, like maybe like a Taken franchise. There's like 12 of them. I don't even know. Or like, you know, Fast and the Furious, which is just very like over the top action, you know, nonstop, you know, like kind of like kind of glorifying action, but also not taking itself too serious action.
Yeah.
But then you get something like Mad Max, which is really its own thing. I think the only other series of action movies I would kind of link this towards would maybe be the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. Yeah. In a way, because they have a similar, I wouldn't say look, but similar feel in the way that
it's shot very strategically.
Yeah, exactly.
It's artful. Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
But it's still action packed. You know.
Yeah. I would agree to that for sure. Yeah.
And so, but like what I'm trying to get at is we don't get a lot of that. I mean, the last one came out like 2011, 2012. You know.
And when we do, man, it's always a treat. Really, like to bring those two sides of film together in a really well done way is pretty amazing.
I completely agree, and I mean, even the way this movie ends is kind of really satisfying for the viewer. Like once the gang realizes that their main mission isn't going to be successful, they don't know where to go. They're like, do we keep moving? What's going to happen? But they decide instead, they're like, well, you know, we have all the resources to overtake home base. Let's go back.
Yeah. Who's there?
Who's there? Yeah. So,
no one's there.
You know, they just essentially grab everyone together. They ask Max to come with, and he says like, yeah, I guess why not? He was ready to leave, but he decided to come with.
Well, I think the whole the way it kind of unfolds is the ladies are willing to bank and just keep heading the same direction, right? Whereas Max wakes up, sees the girls are gone, gets on his bike, charges after them, stops them, and says, look, you've got two options, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can go there and find nothing because we've seen just like we've seen nothing.
Right.
Because there's fucking nothing over there. Or you could go back where you know there's something.
And you often got to wonder, what if they went forward? What would have been there?
Well, I guess we'll have to wait until the next movie to find out.
Which is cool because there's going to be 2 more movies in this franchise.
I didn't know that. That's very cool.
2 more movies going to be coming out.
Do you think they're going to try and mimic a similar storyline or direction as the original?
Yeah, maybe. I guess like it'll be interesting to see how they lead into the original, right? Or like if they will or
right. Well, you could say that a lot of elements of this movie are similar to the first Mad Max.
Yeah, I would say so, totally. But
it's definitely a different story. But like,
it'll be interesting to see like Max become more mad, right? Because in this film, he's not really. He doesn't have much of a bone to pick with anyone. He's kind of more focused on himself. He's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't become the vengeful ex-cop that we learn about in later films, right?
Right.
Or the earlier films, I should say. But I think it's funny that the way this film ends is they overtake they overtake home base, and they're able to, you know, kind of make good for themselves. And there's that great shot of Furiosa and Max looking at each other from above and below, and they're just kind of like smiling at each other while water's pouring down. And it's really satisfying, like gratifying moment.
And then they go their separate ways, right?
They go their separate ways. So we don't know what's gonna happen after that, but I don't know.
Really, the only time either one of them ever went out of their way for the other person is that last scene. Max takes it upon himself to go back to the green place with them.
Right.
Otherwise, he would have split in a different direction. If Furiosa wasn't there, Max would have been gone in a fucking second, dude.
No, he wouldn't have cared.
But
in a lot of ways, I think Max needed Furiosa. I think he needed her for some like direction on like where to be.
He definitely got something out of that for sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't in a way that he like was using her, but it was more or less he realized that, you know, like we were talking earlier, like their motivations and their morals really didn't align in a way.
Well, I think it's almost as if Max is trying to run away from something that haunts him in the past, which is a loved one dying.
Right.
And so it's almost as if he doesn't want to risk loving anyone else or having anything to do with anyone else for fear of them dying like everyone else. So...
And you can appreciate Furiosa wanting to go back to her loved ones, right?
Yeah.
He understands what it's like to lose someone, so he wants to do what he can to help someone who he trusts.
Exactly.
To get that,
so I think he relates to her in a specific way, but I think he also longs for that feeling that she has at the moment. And so he feels that towards her by the end of the movie.
And you can tell there's definitely a certain point that, you know, the movie makes or Max's character makes into not getting too close with Furiosa. Mm-hmm. You know, they definitely have some sort of camaraderie and they definitely bond, but there's definitely a certain aspect of the movie that like forces them not to get too close, or even if they're just better friends or romantic or whatever it may be, the kind of that boundary is made. They're obviously like we were saying, the last scene is them kind of like nodding at each other and smiling, and you know, obviously they're friends, or obviously there's that success that they feel together, but at the same time you definitely feel that distance. But I think that's important. I really do.
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
But if you look at this movie as a whole, I think it's like we were talking almost earlier, the way that it's only one big chase scene, right? But along the way, we get so many characters introduced, and we get so many elements of this world introduced, and there's not a lot of dialogue or talking. We mainly get visual storytelling, and that's, I think, where this movie like has the highest achievement possible. Yeah,
it's to say this movie is just a chase scene is almost not being true to the film, because in the end, this movie is visual character development and sort of a like a disturbing journey that these characters had to go through. It's less of a chase than it is more of a war almost, or a battle, or kind of like an overcoming.
Yeah, it's you know, you get a kind of a sense of revenge almost too. Like,
yeah, you know, there's some revenge in there, absolutely. Yeah,
Furiosa's trying to, you know, get back at him, Oranjo, and also, you know, take back what she believes is hers. But see, that's honestly why I think Furiosa is kind of more important, because we don't really get a lot of Max's true motivation. All we get is he wants to leave.
Okay, but hear me out on this one thing.
We don't know anything about his backstory. They allude to it a lot, but we have nothing. We don't know his actual true motivation.
Hear me out. The story of Mad Max is about the adventures in the places that he goes to and the things he sees and experiences, right?
Right.
So this is just one of his adventures and one of the main characters in one of his adventures. Like
Furiosa, the main character.
One of the main characters in his adventures. Okay, so my whole thing is like Furiosa is immortally tied to the Immortan Joe storyline. Well, Mad Max isn't. Mad Max can go anywhere in this world and do anything, and the story is about Mad Max and his adventures in the world, not necessarily that one storyline. Like, he's not inevitably tied to Furiosa.
I would agree with that. But in this film in particular, Furiosa is definitely the main front and center character.
Well, Mad Max is the main character and she's number 2.
That's not what I just said. That's not true at all. Okay, you look at it this way. I agree with what you're saying, where it's like, because all the other films are like that too, right? It's like Mad Max's zany adventures in a way, right? He goes to different areas and it's how he interacts with that surrounding, which I think is totally right. But you gotta look at the way that this whole movie is centered around Furiosa. How could she not be the main character?
Well, it's not necessarily centered around Furiosa. It's centered around Mad Max too, right? It's about his escape just as much as it is about her escape.
For the first 20 minutes, but the 140 minutes is about Furiosa.
Oh my god. We're going to have to agree to disagree on this one.
Alright.
But
getting pretty Furiosa around here right now.
But ting. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about the seed and the old ladies that we meet.
The idea to like replant or refertilize maybe the world.
So something that really brings the idea of the green place to life is the fact that they're the connection between those ladies and the fact they remember it so vividly, and those seeds.
Yeah. Do you think that is like alluding to future titles in the franchise, or do you think that's a lost cause?
Well, I think potentially. Like, I don't think it's going to be a main plot point. I think it's like, for example, do you remember the 9 of wives of Morton Joe? There was that one really bleached blonde-haired girl. I can't remember her name, but she's the one who takes the seeds after that grandma passes. She wants and so I think we might get a glimpse of in a future film of her sort of being like the groundskeeper or the greenskeeper or the one who looks after or teaches how to plant fruits and vegetables, whatever. I think we might get a glimpse of that, but I don't think it's going to be a main plot point by any means.
I don't really think so either. I think more or less it just seemed like this is a memento of a past life, and she was just holding on to it to kind of like, have it as a friendly reminder of what once existed, and also to honor that woman, because the old lady who gives her the seeds ends up dying right away shortly after. Yeah. So I think it's more or less just like holding it as like a souvenir or a emotional memento of that era. But it's fun. You could speculate. There's a lot of like, theories out there we could talk about on that, and it would be interesting to see where it goes next.
It's almost as if she just passed the torch on, and now the torch she passed is kind of in the right hands, because this girl has the opportunity to use these seeds to actually grow them, right? Right.
And like you got to wonder, because there's vegetation to some degree, right?
Yeah, we get a glimpse of it, I think, in the beginning and the end.
The home base has, from what we understand, the most of it, but it's still kind of dying out. It's not a lot.
Well, yeah, it's just the top of a small mountain.
And like
small rock basin.
The title of the next film was supposed to be called Mad Max: The Wasteland. So hard to say if that, but it could make an appearance. I mean, the idea of like trying to repopulate a wasteland or trying to, make a wasteland more flourishing.
Yeah.
Taken care of in terms of like, I guess, vegetation, because there's none of it really around most of these areas.
Yeah, and if there's anything we know about the story of Mad Max, it is a wasteland everywhere you go. It's the story of a wasteland basically, and so I almost wonder if there's going to be some form of, if they're in the beginning it's going to be flourishing and there's going to be some form of plague that hits and ruins the greens, or if it's not even going to take place there at all.
I honestly think it won't. I think it's going to be a completely different area.
I totally think it's going to be Mad Max.
It could have something to do with the I guess the destroyed Greenland, which is the poisonous area where they get stuck in. That might be part of the wastelands. Right. I'm not sure. Which might be a nice connection to the first film.
Right. But I don't think it's going to have anything to do with Morton Joe's sort of palace.
If anything, I think that's more of Furiosa and the women to kind of make that their base and, maybe take it over in a more positive light.
Yeah.
Be good to the slaves, or, change that government aspect or that regime into a more positive area, and obviously get rid of whatever Morton Joe had created. It would be nice to, I think, I just know, looking at George Miller's work, I don't think he would make a direct sequel. I think it would, like you were talking about, another Mad Max adventure, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Obviously there's going to be an odd, connection, a little tidbit, things like that. Because even in this film, you get actors from the first movie as, extras and stuff like that, and they play little bit roles. And he likes to work that in and play homage to himself, which is, I think, pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's cool to retain the connection.
Yeah, and you have to, especially for a franchise that's lasted over 36 years now.
Yeah. And still airs regularly, right?
Well, yeah, you see Mad Max on the TV all the time. Yeah. I think I saw Thunderdome literally last week.
Yeah.
But, the fact that there is still a Mad Max franchise ongoing right now, and it's really well made, I think is cool, because that's one of those almost forgotten franchises in a way. It's what started Mel Gibson's career, and it's most people regard them pretty highly besides Thunderdome. But, Thunderdome in itself has good qualities too. It's the worst out of the three, most people say.
Well, it's very much...
It's sillier, right? It's more elaborate. It's not...
Mm-hmm. And there's, people tend to look at, of a group of three, of a trilogy, there's always one that didn't make it, right?
Well, the third is just I don't know, it's one of those things where if it was just its own movie, people would probably like it a lot more. It's so different compared to the first two. Mm-hmm. But... whatever.
But I think, overall, I'm super excited to see what George Miller has to do with the next one, Wasteland.
You got us so excited with this one. I mean, this is kind of... I didn't even know what to think about a Mad Max reboot or Mad Max prequel. I was kind of uncertain on what to expect from this. Mm-hmm. But I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, like
100%.
it's amazing how much I got into the world after seeing it again.
And there's so much about it I don't even understand anymore. But like every time I try to look into it, I find up something new. And
it's just an amazing world, and I think that's probably a good spot to leave it right there.
Yeah, we highly recommend checking out this film. It's for rent right now. It'll probably be on Netflix within a couple of months, I'm sure. So definitely pop Peep Game on Mad Max Fury Road. We loved it over here at the TSV, and if you guys love us, make sure to subscribe, watch our vids, check out the iTunes, Stitcher, all that stuff. Subscribe to our RSS feed, and if you want to check us out on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff, please do. Thanks for checking in this week. I'm Kyle.
I'm Dan.
Talk to you later.
Peace.